How is everyone? I hope you are all doing well. Today's video is going to be really interesting, so make sure to watch it from beginning to end, and please don't forget to leave a like. If you watch this story until the very end, you will be able to learn and understand a lot of things. So, without further delay, let's get started. My name is Ananya. I am 18 years old and a university student. But my real story begins inside our tiny house, where everything revolves around my guardian, whom I call Uncle. When I lost my parents at a young age and was left utterly helpless, he was the one who gave me shelter. To me, he felt like my only hero. He used to protect me, placing his hand on my head and telling me stories to put me to sleep. Yet now, when I look at myself in the mirror, I realize I am no longer that little child. My body, my face, everything has changed. And sometimes that change gets caught in Uncle's eyes. Though he never says anything out loud, I can still sense how deep his gaze is. When I return from the university and Uncle opens the door to see me in wet clothes, he rushes to bring me a towel. In that moment, it feels like I am not just a girl taking shelter in his house. I have become something more to him. When the towel touches my skin, a strange warmth seems to spread across my entire body. Blushing and trying to cover myself, I say, "There was no need," but the unusual spark of affection I see in the corner of Uncle's eyes awakens in the unfamiliar tremor deep inside my chest. When I sit down to study at night, he comes and stands quietly beside me. He asks if the light is sufficient. I know it's not just about the light. He actually wants to be near me. I keep writing in my notebook, but I can feel his gaze drifting over my body. I grow restless, yet I say nothing. Only my breathing becomes a bit heavy. One day I was bedridden, burning with a fever. The housemaid was out at the time. Uncle sat beside me, pressing a wet cloth to my forehead. Through my feverish haze, I opened my eyes and saw how anxious his face looked. His fingers brushed against my cheek. That touch didn't lower my fever. Instead, my body filled with a different kind of warmth. I pretended to be asleep, as if I understood nothing, yet deep down I knew that even after his hand moved away, the trace of that touch remained. In the evening, as I stood on the balcony catching the breeze, Uncle came up behind me. He said, "It's not good to stand out so late at night." I asked, "Why?" He simply replied, "You'll catch a cold." But I could perceive a strange tremor in his voice, as if he wanted to shield me from everyone else's eyes, as if I belonged solely to him. Sometimes I feel that what I think about him can never be told to anyone. Society might not accept it, but who can stop the emotions inside me? I find myself in his shadow. My heart pounds in his presence. In the stillness of the night when his footsteps echo, my whole body trembles, even though I lie there quietly. I realize this pull is not just respect for a guardian. There is something within it that I am afraid to utter. Yet every day I drown in that infatuation. I cannot restrain myself. And inside his eyes I seem to find something similar, something neither of us puts into words but silently feels. That night I was lying in bed, but sleep eluded me. Over and over it felt as if Uncle's gaze was pierced deep into my heart. Even wrapped in my blanket, I kept listening to whether the light in his room went off or not. As his footsteps drifted down the corridor, my heart raced. Suddenly, I thought, what if he opens the door and walks into my room? What will I say? Will I pretend to be asleep, or will I open my eyes and look at him? This dilemma made me even more restless. Unconsciously, I hugged my pillow tightly and began to imagine his presence right beside me, his breath brushing against my skin. Yet, in reality, he didn't come. I was merely trapped inside my own imagination. Waking up at dawn, I saw him sitting on the balcony having tea. I washed up and went to stand before him. He smiled and said, "You studied very late last night. Your eyes are red." I couldn't say anything. I just stood there silently with my head bowed. Then he gently touched my cheek and said, "Take care of yourself." I knew that touch was born out of care. I didn't say anything more. I just kept it hidden in my heart. The days passed one by one. I couldn't avoid Uncle. Instead, I looked for pointless excuses just to be near him. I would go to the kitchen pretending to work just to strike up a conversation. Other times, I would sit at the reading table so he could come over and check my notebook. Yet internally, I wanted his eyes to be on me. I wanted to feel his breath. One afternoon, a storm hit. Everyone else in the house was out and Uncle and I were home alone. The wind was battering the windows. Suddenly, the power went out. Terrified, I went and stood close to him. He smiled and said, "Don't be afraid, I am here." Then he placed his hand on my shoulder. In that moment, it felt like all the fear in the world vanished. I looked up at him gently. In the darkness, only his eyes were gleaming, as if boring right through me. I pressed my lips together, wanting to say something, but I couldn't. I just stood there in silence. Then he kissed my forehead. I didn't feel afraid. Rather, I felt a sense of peace. I kept my head rested down, but the lingering sensation of that touch shook me deeply. The storm stopped and the lights came back. Everyone returned and everything went back to normal. But inside me, nothing was the same anymore. I had stepped towards a new realization where he and I understood everything without saying a word. Keeping it hidden from society, we were carrying on a silent conversation within ourselves. I returned to that night over and over. The memory of his kiss still felt fresh on my forehead. Lying down, I would touch it with my fingers while my heart raced. I knew this was a bond of care and love, something I could never admit to anyone, yet impossible to evade. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a different person, as if a hidden light was glowing on my face. Looking in the mirror, I touched my lips and remembered that kiss on my forehead. I felt shy, yet I secretly relished the memory. When I went downstairs, Uncle was sitting at the breakfast table. He was reading the newspaper in a casual manner, but it felt to me like his eyes were actually searching for me. As I went and sat near him, he looked up. That gaze was so profound that my heart skipped a beat. I started sipping my tea hurriedly. He smiled and asked, "Why are you drinking hot tea in such a rush?" Without saying a word, I just lowered my head. Yet it felt like he understood everything. At noon, I went to the university. Sitting in class, I tried to study but couldn't focus. Repeatedly, his eyes, his touch, his voice, everything seemed to surround me. My friends were teasing me, but I remained quiet. It felt like I was walking a path inside myself that could be revealed to no one, yet turning back from that path was impossible. Returning in the afternoon, I saw him sitting on the balcony. I quietly went and stood beside him. He looked up, smiled faintly, and asked, "Are your studies going well?" I replied, "Yes," but in reality, my time was spent thinking about him instead of studying. Whether he realized that or not, I don't know, but his gaze remained locked onto my eyes for a long time. I couldn't look back any longer. A tempest was raging inside my chest. I went inside, closed the door, and buried my face in the pillow. That night, I dreamed that Uncle and I were walking by the seashore. The waves were crashing against our feet. He was holding my hand, and I was smiling. Suddenly, he leaned down and kissed my forehead and said, "You are only mine." I woke up with a start and sat up. My body was trembling. The dream was so vivid it felt real. I knew it was just imagination, yet it ignited a fire within me. For a few days, I spoke to him less than before, as if trying to shield myself. But he would occasionally come and ask, "Is everything all right?" I would smile and say, "Yes." Yet behind my smile, how many storms were raging? Did he not sense it? Or was it just me thinking that he understood? I don't know. One evening, the other family members suddenly left for a relative's house for a few days. At that time, it was just Uncle and me in the house.
On the very first day, a strange excitement consumed me. It felt like the entire world was empty, leaving only the two of us. I went to the kitchen repeatedly under the pretext of bringing him tea. He smiled and said, "You are taking great care of me today." I said, "Yes," but the real reason was different. I wanted to look into his eyes again and again to hear the tone of his voice. After dinner, I pretended to study, but I had no focus. Uncle came and sat beside me, asking, "Are you feeling tired?" Involuntarily, I rested my head on his shoulder. He said nothing, he just placed his hand on my head. At that moment, it felt like I was in the safest refuge in the world. Yet within that safety, there was also a strange tremor. My heart swung and my eyes began to close. Time seemed to stand still. Suddenly, he said, "You have grown up so much." I looked up, startled. There was a look in his eyes that left me speechless. I couldn't answer. My breathing simply grew heavy. His hand traced down through my hair and stopped on my shoulder. I could no longer look at him. It felt like we had both come to a place from which there was no return. The next morning, the others called, and I handed the phone to him. He spoke normally. I stood nearby, but internally I could feel that we were no longer in the same place. A new secret bridge had been built between us, one that only the two of us knew about. In the afternoon, I was sitting on the balcony with a book in my hand. Uncle came and stood beside me. Even with my eyes on the book, I couldn't read. I could only feel his breath hitting my cheek. I moved away slightly, but then came close again. I couldn't escape. He said nothing, but stood there silently. I knew that silence was deeper than words. As the days marched on, I realized that my silent pull to him was growing denser. Even when I opened my books at the university, his face, his voice, and his care kept spinning in my head. I would chat with my friends, but behind the laughter, only his name remained hidden in my heart. One day, I got late returning from class. The sky turned dark, and suddenly it started raining. I returned home soaked. The moment the door opened, Uncle stood up anxiously. He rushed to hand me a towel. I was pressing my wet clothes against myself. He said, "Dry quickly or you'll catch a cold." I stood silently, staring at him. There was something in his eyes that couldn't be put into words. He sent me to my room, but in my mind, I kept wondering, why does his care feel so different? At dinner time, no one else was around. The two of us sat down to eat together. I was just moving the rice around with my hand, sitting quietly. Uncle smiled and asked, "Why so quiet today?" I said, "It's nothing." But in reality, a strange tremor was going on inside me. His eyes were fixed on my face. I was finding it hard to breathe, yet by no means did I want to escape from that moment. After eating, I picked up my book. From beside me, he said, "Don't put too much pressure on your eyes. They're turning red." I said, "Okay," but the letters in the book were turning blurry then. Only his voice was echoing inside my head. Suddenly, he came and stood beside me. His shadow fell over the book. I raised my head to look. The moment our eyes met, the surroundings seemed to freeze. I couldn't say anything. Silently, he turned the page of my notebook, then gently placed his hand on my head. I closed my eyes, and my heart trembled. It felt like that touch was filling me up from the inside. The next morning, I intentionally went to the kitchen to make tea for him. Taking the cup in hand, I went to him. He smiled and said, "You are taking great care of me today." I bit my lip and smiled, but I couldn't tell him the real truth, that I only want to be near him and no one else. I just want to drown in his eyes, to hide in his shadow. In the evening, we were sitting on the balcony. The wind was messing up my hair. Uncle gently tucked the hair away. I lowered my eyes. The touch of his fingers lingered on my cheek for a long time. I knew this wasn't just care. There was something more inside it that neither of us were pronouncing, yet in every moment it was scattered all around us. Over the last few weeks, I felt that the relationship between him and me had transformed. My time was spent looking at him at the start of every day and thinking about him before the end of every night. Returning from the university, the moment the door opened, I knew his gaze would be on me. He would smile and welcome me. that smile would wash away all my fatigue. I know this is not just an illusion, it is a deep feeling that I have accepted internally.
In the darkness of the night, even as I lie awake, I imagine the gentle vibration of his voice and the shadow of his affection. Sometimes I see in my dreams that I am walking holding his hand, and the waves of the ocean are washing over our feet. After waking up, I feel my heart pounding. My mind gradually calms down, but it feels as if he is still beside me. One day, no one was home, I went to the kitchen and made tea. As Uncle passed by, he said, "Carry it carefully." Holding the cup, I looked at him. He nodded his head. The affection and spark in his eyes filled my entire mind. I felt shy but couldn't run away. Instead, I came even closer. After dinner, we were sitting on the balcony. In the quiet breeze, my hair was blowing. He placed his hand on my shoulder. I felt my breath catching. Even just his presence made me feel entirely complete. In the silence of the night, neither of us said a word, yet all the thoughts and emotions of our hearts were exchanged. The next morning, before leaving for the university, I looked out the window. The sun was rising. In the light breeze, it felt like that same silent gaze of his was floating in. I couldn't hold myself back. Standing like that for a while, I just realized all words are unnecessary, because what is going on between us is beyond language, understood only through the eyes and silence. Month after month, this feeling is progressively growing deeper. I know I have grown up. I know that in his eyes there is not just affection, but an invisible relationship that I do not admit to anyone. It exists only between us. Both of us know it, and both of us are silent. Before sleeping at night, I lie in bed. I rest my hand gently on the pillow. I close my eyes. I imagine his hand slowly coming down to my forehead. In our dreams, we walk, not speaking, only our gaze and silence tell our story. I understand that this is my world's safest, deepest companion. No words are necessary, just that silence, just that infatuation. One day, on my way back from the university, I suddenly realized that it was no longer possible to hide my feelings. I admitted all the emotions inside me to myself. But I know that in the eyes of society, this is looked at differently. Therefore, only to him, only in our hearts, through silence, do we understand each other. No words are necessary. I have learned that within this infatuation lies my peace, my joy, my fulfillment, and I know that ultimately this silence and gaze form the deepest chapter of our story. In the stillness of the night, I lie awake. A light breeze enters through the window, making my heart flutter. Inside, I smile, taking a deep breath with my eyes closed. I have understood that our relationship is not merely about shelter or affection, it is a silent infatuation that will remain hidden in our hearts forever, and I feel at peace because I know this infatuation is my most beloved story, my own story, which is solely mine, solely his, our silent story.
Such psychological complexities or incidents happen quite often in our society. Therefore, in conclusion, I would like to say, everyone, please stay aware. If any such unwanted complications or mental conflicts arise, take the right measures. We were able to learn a lot from today's story. This video is primarily for creating awareness. May you all stay aware and stay healthy. Friends, that is all for today. To get such mysterious and educational stories every day, please like the video and subscribe to the channel to stay with us.